So today is Wednesday, October 20th. So for the next 7 days, we will be in this full moon in Aries energy, just like hitting a tuning fork. Ding! It takes us into the third quarter of this lunation cycle that started with the new moon in Libra on October 6th. So full moons always mean that the sun and the moon are opposite one another, which is known as an opposition, 180 degrees. So it will be in what the zodiacal order calls its opposition. So right now the sun is at the end of its journey in Libra. There's 30 degrees to each sign in the zodiac. So this full moon is happening at 27 degrees. So that means the sun is almost finished being in Libra, and it's going to be actually moving into Scorpio this Sunday. So we move into Scorpio season. So this means that our full moon happens when Aries arrives, or when the moon arrives at 27 degrees Aries, which happened early this morning. So what we do with that energy, with the full moon energy, there's a macro and a micro that we can work here. We can say, for sure, no matter if we're working with the macro or the micro, that a full moon is about illumination, and it's about illuminating some sort of apex point or fruition point. Little baseball analogy, when my coach put me into play outfield, because I was always an infielder, it was all about watching for the apex of the ball. So when somebody hit a pop fly and you were a fielder, you would wait and wait and wait until you've seen the ball hit its apex, which means it's not going to raise any higher into the sky, and then it's going to start its downward journey. And as soon as you see that apex, it's like a moment in time. I'm sure there's some physics to explain it. There's a moment in time where the ball freezes in the air. And that's when you start to move and track the ball on where it's actually going to start traveling down. So that's what a full moon is. It's that apex point. So the ball was hit at the new moon. The apex is the highest point of the ball, which is the full moon. We track it, we see it, and then we start to move and adjust to catch the ball. So that's one of the big themes of a full moon is patience and stillness. To take a moment to sit with all of the energy that you're feeling, all of the things that are going on in your life, everything. It's a snapshot moment in time. I've used the analogy of taking a car ride. So you have a destination and you get into your car at the new moon, and then you travel and you reach that destination at that lookout point on the full moon, and you stop and you look around and you see where you're at. And then you start plotting the trip back home again, which is the waning phase. So when the full moon happens, it's a shifting of gears from the waxing to the waning, from growing and building to releasing, harvesting and releasing. So on a micro level, we could look back to 2 weeks ago at the new moon in Libra and revisit the seeds or the intentions that were planted at the new moon in Libra, and then look at this as an apex point in that lunar journey. So a month-long journey, a 28-day journey, so the halfway point. Or we can look back to 6 months ago when it was a new moon in Aries. And what seeds did we plant 6 months ago when the new moon was in Aries? And now it's time to stop and look at the results or where you're at with those Aries intentions that you set back in spring. That would have been, I think it was March, where are we? Aries, yeah, April 11th. So if you have a journal going back to April 11th, I remember that's when I actually started the Emerge lunar reports. That was new moon in Aries was the very first one. And I did a report every day for that entire lunar cycle. And now it's been once a week. So I'm going to take some time over the next week to sit with that journey and look at the apex point of that journey and where I want to move forward with it to complete that cycle. So we can work macro, we can work micro. Either way, it's at the apex point of either a year-long cycle or a month-long cycle, a solar cycle or a lunar cycle. So illumination. So what happens at the apex point is something is illuminated. It's like, where are we at? What's going on? Where am I standing at this point in time? It's like a snapshot, like we were talking about. So what do you do with that information? So I've written down two main things. So in all these years of watching the lunar cycles, there's two main things on an apex point or a full moon in any cycle. Perhaps it's illuminated what it is that you need to harvest, or it illuminates what it is you need to release. Harvesting, releasing. Ideally, it's both of them. So when it's at the apex point, it's like, oh, this is the wisdom that was developed to me, that was delivered to me through this experience, or this is the lesson that I needed to learn, or this is the first thing that's coming up. It's that perhaps we hang on to, perhaps that's the harvest. And then all the other things that we have around that situation, it's time to spend the waning cycle releasing all of that, because often we can miss the point because we're focused on all these little tiny side details that are surrounding a topic or a situation or an area of our life. And so what the waning cycle is saying is stop looking at all those distractions. Focus on the seed wisdom. Let everything else fall away. We can also look at a release as far as releasing an energy out into the world. So we often think about releasing or letting go as, releasing that which no longer serves us or that which we no longer need. But it could also be looked at in a way of releasing an offering to the world, releasing a piece of art, releasing a creative project, releasing a piece of yourself into the world, an act of kindness, of love, releasing into a certain area of your life where the full moon is occurring in your chart. So the full moon apex could also be like a light bulb idea going off, like, oh, I'm going to go out and stand in line at Starbucks and buy coffee for the next person who's behind me. A release, some sort of release into the world. Actually, little side note, who was I listening to? I listened to the astrology podcast a lot, and there's a astrological magician on there named Austin Coppock, and he was telling a story a couple months ago about a certain magical tradition where when you cast your spell, that it doesn't actually become activated until you do a good deed attached within that cycle. So this could be even, he wasn't talking about moon cycles, but this could be it if you, did some spell work on the new moon, the full moon comes up, here's that act of kindness to activate it or release it into the world. So, we can work with it on a lot of different layers, as long as that is that concept in mind. And that's what I find with a lot of these ancient languages, especially interpreting symbols that can mean a lot of different things, is that the interpretation is not black and white. It's more important to understand the underlying energies that you're working with and try to tap into that in your own way, rather than having this like black and white English language only interpretation, because our language is just not advanced enough to encapsulate the what these symbols hold, the messages that these symbols hold. So that's the energy that we're working with, full moon, apex energy. If you wanted to add another layer to that, then we would talk about the sign that it's occurring in. And right now it's occurring in the sign of Aries, which is the very first sign of the entire zodiac. It's the most primal sign, it's fire, and it's about the self. It's raw drive, raw passion. So if we're feeling, and I can feel it happening even in our household and even in our animals, that our animal companions are also, one of them in particular is getting really agitated and just needs to be doing something all the time. And I can see that also happening within myself. There's this, it's almost like an agitation that's building up. That's Mars energy. So Mars is the ruling planet of Aries. So if we look to Mars in the sky right now, it's in Libra. So it may have something to do with either a Libra relationship or something Libra, which is art and beauty and peace and harmony. Maybe you're getting agitated in that area of your life that you know that you don't have balance, or you're not at peace with it. I'm just going to side note here, there's also different planets that come into play at different lunation events. And in this one, Pluto is also a big player. It's squaring this full moon, and a square is a hard aspect. It's like bumping into a 90-degree angle. You have to go around a hard corner, and Pluto is like heavy. It's really heavy, deep energy. So pressurization, bringing pressure onto that agitation around something. So there's air at play in this full moon, there's fire at play, and there's earth at play because Pluto is in Capricorn. So there's like this pressure cooker happening, but there's no water involved in this right now. There's not a big, except for the moon. The moon is the water that's in there, so it's our emotions. But our emotions are, less on nostalgia and, watery things, and it's more like, it could be frustration, it could be anger, it could be something that cuts. So Mars and Aries is also like rules welding and slicing through metal, things that cut. So because Mars is in Libra, we want to check ourselves before we wreck ourselves with this full moon energy that we're dealing with in the next week, because it's going to be real easy to project what you're feeling onto other people and to blame other people for how you're feeling. Well, I'm just irritated because you're in my life. I need to get you out. And that may be true at some point in time, but in the end, the message of this full moon comes back to self because it's in Aries. So what I'm choosing to do with this agitation that I feel is direct it back inward towards an area in my life where I feel disharmony and make a change, make an adjustment. So I'm seeing at that apex point that I've got this underlying frustration. I can look to the area in my chart where that's landing. So I can either look to where Aries is, what house it rules in my chart. I can look to Libra, what area in my life that rules in my chart. I can also look to Capricorn and what area that rules in my chart. And I could even look at all three, and that's like a T square. It's like finding balance between all those areas in my life. Or I could keep it super simple because it's Aries, and it's just like, okay, I'm tired of not eating enough vegetables. When it really comes down to it, I'm tired of how I'm feeding myself. I'm fed up. It's time to change. And being a transformation coach for as long as I have, I know no change happens until you get fed up with yourself. And you're like, okay, it's time. So taking that agitation, that pressurization, and directing it towards, you know what? It's enough. I'm going to take that Mars energy, that God of War energy, and I'm going to go to war on junk food entering my body. I've had enough. It's just, I'm going to bring more vegetables in, and that's it. And I'm just going to start that right now. So we can project and use energies with our will. That's one of the wonderful things about being human, is we can direct with our will. So those are some ideas, and that's what's been coming up in my mind, ruminating about this full moon and what's happening. I didn't even use my chalkboard today. What did I want to? One more thing I want to touch on is the this Saturday. You might have heard that Mercury has now stationed direct as of Monday, as of 2 days ago. So stationing direct means it's no longer moving backwards. It's been moving backwards for 3 weeks, which means our thought process, our communication, and relationships, because it's in Libra, have been going to the past. Messages coming from the past, visiting the past. So now it's direct, which means no longer going backwards, but it's not going forwards either. It's standing still. On Saturday, it goes out of its shadow, which means it's free to now move on forward. So from these next couple days until Saturday, it's a great time to just sit with any of the lessons that you have learned in the past 3 weeks about reflecting in the past. And then after Saturday, taking that wisdom, ideally, and moving forward with it. Yeah, so lots going on right now. Really important to fight for yourself right now. Take care of yourself, because we're going into Scorpio season, which can be intense. Can be intense. So good time to check yourself on what's out of balance, what doesn't feel like it's in harmony. You know, what does balance mean to you? Where is your center? Before we go into the deepest, most magical, most transformational time of the year that begins this Sunday as we enter into Scorpio. For the Lunar Lifestyle members, I am going to add a second video today, which is a meditation for the full moon in Aries that you can use all this week. That's inspired by an exercise from ceremonial magic, which is called the middle pillar, how to take those energy centers and find that center of balance. So I'll be back with that shortly, and wishing you a successful and enlightening full moon in Aries week.